Hell's angel. Before we get into this angel, I better give you some information. This is taken from, I think, 3 documentaries that have been on television, plus letters and articles written by various people, and people who actually worked in these hospitals. Okay, so it's not me. This is information that I've gathered from all over the place, because it's a very contentious subject. Hell's angel was Mother Teresa. People have always seen Mother Teresa as a saint for what she did. Her sainthood is doubtful because the 2 miracles needed were very suspect. But anyway, popular opinion made her a saint. Did she deserve it? No, she didn't. She was, in fact, absolutely appalling, and people let her get away with it. You didn't challenge her because you'd end up being pilloried. She got away with it for years. First, hospitals. You know all about Teresa's hospitals, where she was looking after the poor and the dying and giving them a nice, peaceful end to their lives. No, totally untrue. She provided no medical care whatsoever, despite the fact countries had poured in medicines and medical equipment. She didn't use it. Why? No medical staff. The odd volunteer nurse who would resign quite quickly. People who volunteered to work in her hospitals didn't last long. This is why. Just take the first thing, sanitation. Very important. Sanitation were basically holes in the ground covered in faeces and urine. To get there, if you've got bandaged feet, you had to walk through it. Infections. If you couldn't walk, you had to crawl through it. Nothing was done about it. The laundry. You'd think going to a laundry to look after the clothes of these people? Forget it. One volunteer wrote, a nun came and dumped a pile of clothing on the floor. It had blood, feces and body fluids all over it. Okay, what do we do with it? No machines. You washed it in cold water and put some antiseptics in there and mixed it up. And then you let it hang up to dry. Great, wonderful, really sterile, wasn't it? When they did use painkillers, these were just aspirins or ibuprofen, those sort of standard ones. This was for people who were dying with a cancer and were in agony. That's all they were allowed to have. She had all these drugs available, locked in the cupboard, went out of date. They did use them when they were out of date, but only when they had somebody who knew how to use them volunteer. So the hospital itself, you know about needles. You've had so many things about HIV and the junkies with their heroin. Free needle exchange, because you should not use the same needle. You shouldn't share. What did they do? They didn't have single use. They had syringes that were multi-use. Needles, blunt. How did they clean them? Sterile? Hot water? No, cold water. They just cleaned these things out with cold water and carried on using them. When challenged, they said, well, it's not much point really, because they're going to die anyway. So, what was her view, which she passed on to all the others, about the people? Pain and suffering makes you closer to God. Pain and suffering makes you closer to God. One sister took that to the extreme. 3 little girls had got caught stealing. And so they were brought to the sister, who lined them up, heated a knife up, and burnt the back of their hands, all 3 of them. Then she put some coconut oil on to soothe it a bit. And then she got another knife and sliced off the blister and put some ointment on. When asked why, she said, pain and suffering make you closer to God, and correct you. So that is typical of her hospitals. Now, when you look at the financing of all of this, how much money do you think that was given to Mother Teresa over the years when she was running it all? Any ideas? No? 50 billion.
What?
50 billion pounds went into the coffers. No, didn't go into the coffers. Where did it go? The Vatican Bank. None was used, well, no, that's not quite true, not none. Some was used to provide equipment, food, clothing, etc. But the nuns themselves, when they were recruited, were given 2 salaries for a year. They were allowed to write home once a month, and they were allowed to go home every 10 years. So it was a pretty rough life being a nun in those situations. So that's the bit everybody doesn't know about. They all think that it was lovely. It wasn't. It was terrible. Absolutely appalling. And this happened in all of her hospitals. There are so many volunteer accounts of what was going on, why they resigned. So let's go on to her other part. She got the Nobel Peace Prize. She got the President's Medal in the States. She got all sorts of awards for her work, because nobody ever really checked it. What happens when you get somebody who's at this level? There's a guy called Lucio Gelli, which I doubt whether any of you heard of. No. Anyone heard of the Bank Ambrosiana scandal? No. You're all too young, for God's sake. All right, yes. Now, what happened with Gelli? He was the boss of a bank in, I think it was in the US, went bust, but the money sort of went to Switzerland. And he was at the head of the P2 Freemasons Lodge. And he set up all sorts of little deals. He was on the run from the Italian police for fraud. He was in serious trouble with the church itself because money seemed to have not gone to the Vatican Bank that should have gone to the Vatican Bank. He was a personal friend of Mother Teresa. And she wrote a letter to the Nobel lot saying, oh, he's such a wonderful person, he's really good, he's done this book, and you really ought to give him the Nobel Prize for Literature. You know. And she knew what he was like. And there's one thing that people don't know about him, which has never been proved yet. Do you remember the Bologna train explosion? No, railway station, 97 people killed. It appears that the head of the Freemason Lodge had arranged a deal for $1 million for a terrorist group to go and do it. Why? To destabilise the government. That's what it was about. She got involved with sex scandals. She got involved with protecting a guy, Reverend Donald Maguire, been abusing children for many years. It comes up and she writes a letter, oh, he's such a wonderful man. He couldn't possibly have done this. He gets another 10 years abusing children. Angel? Oh, she's a bloody demon.